I'm really, really excited to welcome my guest onto the show today, somebody I met a long time ago, but someone who has not only got so many great innovative approaches and ideas to her practice, supported by technology, but also really grounded in practical approaches, things that actually work. And so, with that in mind, I won't do the full intro and her history and her career and all that. I'll let her explain all those things. But I'm really excited to welcome onto the show today Laura Knight. Welcome, Laura. How are you
Hi,
doing?
I'm very well. Lovely to be here, Mark. Thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome to be here. I'm really excited. We've been trying to get this conversation recorded for some time. I'm
Yeah,
really
we've
excited
we've
to.
not done well with the diary, but we're here now, which is wonderful. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Look, Laura, for those who don't know you, would you mind just sort of sharing a few things about yourself? You know, where do you work and how did you become a teacher? How did you get into this game? Did you do anything before you became a teacher? Did you have that route straight in? Can you share a bit about that, please?
Sure, absolutely. So I work at Berkhamsted School in Hertfordshire. We're an independent group of schools all the way through from day nursery to sixth form with about
Hmm.
2,000 students. I'm director of digital learning, so I lead on innovation, technology, IT, those kinds of things, and do lots of work on supporting staff and students with digital learning. I also work on sort of the safeguarding aspect of things in terms of online safeguarding and filtering, monitoring, that kind of stuff. And do lots of work too on diversity and inclusion as part of my sort of wider role. I've been at Berkhamsted for 11 years now, so I've been here for a while, and have been in this role sort of full time since I want to say about 2014. So yeah, I'm sort of quite established in this space, which is fantastic. And before that, I was actually I've trained as a modern languages teacher. I'm a French specialist, so I used to be head of MFL here. And before I was at Berkhamsted, I taught in 3 different comprehensive schools across Cambridgeshire, Suffolk, and Hertfordshire. So yeah, that sort of MFL teaching was actually really useful to me because I've come at this rather than coming at it as a sort of a technologist or a computer scientist. I've seen classroom life from a sort of modern languages perspective, which has helped me stay very much grounded in what it is to be a classroom teacher when it comes to supporting others. So that's been great.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Laura. And it's interesting. So that leads quite nicely into the first question because, as someone who's sort of been, come from the classroom and firmly grounded in thinking about how technology can support teaching and learning activities, and I see really innovative uses from language teachers,
Mm.
because there are so many aspects to how children need to learn languages, from reading, writing, listening, speaking. There are so many facets to it. Um, with that sort of baseline, I guess that's really helped you move into the role that you're in now. Can you share a little bit? And we've gone off piece on the questions already, but can you share a little bit about how you sort of apply what you've learned from the classroom to what you share with your sort of wider community with teachers across the school?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this the first thing, and actually this comes back to something that you mentioned in your intro, is about being eminently practical. I'm always looking for things that are going to make teachers' lives work better, flow better, be more efficient, and to really put teaching and learning right at the heart of what we're doing. I
Mm.
think it's very easy if you're a tech enthusiast to get distracted by the shiny newness of things, and we love some shiny new stuff, and that's fine. It's great to be enthusiastic. Techno joy is joyful, but we must stay focused on what really works and how we can drive standards up, how we can make sure that performance is as good as it can be, and sometimes that isn't necessarily the shiny, but it's more of a practical approach. So I think holding those principles in mind is something that's really important to us here. We're not about gloss, we're about amazing functionality, making sure that things do the things they're supposed to do. So I think that's the first thing. And in terms of sort of making that work, putting people right at the center of your tech strategy, I think is absolutely crucial. If we forget that the people involved, the teachers and the students, the parents and the wider community, are all folks with lives and frustrations and questions and needs, and possibly not that much time. it's so much easier to build things with empathy and understanding for those people's needs, rather than just chucking out sort of new systems or new ideas and seeing what works. So I think it really focusing in on the people is hugely important, perhaps counterintuitive, but crucial.
No, absolutely. And, if people aren't going to use technology, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on it or how amazing it is, it's never going to have any impact on work if you don't actually work with the people that you work with.
Absolutely. And I think there's something really kind of, again, perhaps counterintuitive, it's almost paradoxical that in this sort of role, you want to almost make yourself redundant by the implementation that you put in place becomes so normal that it's sort of invisible. It's just the way that we do things, and that allows you to layer on more sort of iterative improvement and additional functionality and tweaks and that kind of thing. But the baseline is no longer, this is the newfangled thing. It's just what we do.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, that's a phrase that I use quite a bit myself, because you want to make it de rigueur, don't you? Like it is what we do. But how do we get to that point, Laura? Because one of the things that I've always found difficult is elevating not only the competence and the skill base of staff, but their confidence in using it as well, that it will work. How do you go about approaching that within your school?
So I think there's two approaches that are really important to me. The first is to remove the obstacles to the innovative approach, make it the easier, most straightforward, quick win option. Do it this way because it will save you time. Do it this way because you don't have to carry all your books home. Do it this way because you can get feedback straight to students. You don't have to wait till next week's lesson. And teachers are going to look at that and say, oh, well, there's obvious benefits to me in my classes. Amazing. Why would I not? And even those who aren't convinced are going to be curious enough to explore it. The second part of that sort of, once you've promoted those worthwhile quick wins, is then to sort of bolster confidence and awareness with a minimum baseline of training so that everyone has enough to get started straight away. I think it's really important that you don't sort of tease things and then leave people wondering, well, how do I do this? Oh, I'm just not going to bother. I'll try it next term. Teachers are quite linear in how they manage time. And often if you don't get things ready for September, or you don't have things in place for January, it'll just have to wait, because there's limited bandwidth for change along the road. And you have to sort of line things up and get the timelines organized. I think then the next thing that's really important to me is to train people with dignity. And I'm not meaning to sound sort of mean about previous establishments that I've worked with, but I certainly think that too often a whole staff body is sat in a room and expected to have completely undifferentiated training with technology, which in my view is an insult to those staff. Folks come at IT and they come at technology with a huge range of experience and confidence, and it's absolutely right that we should give them a differentiated training experience. So my preferred approach now is to offer everybody training that they can do flexibly at home or at work whenever they choose, that they can access online asynchronously, and then to coach individuals and small groups with their questions and the follow-up that they need as a result of that, which really helps them apply it to their classes and their situations. And for me, that combination of asynchronous online plus personalized coaching means that then you can follow that up with lesson observations, you can follow it up with paired work, I have an open door to my classroom. Oh, you want to see me? I'll show you how I did that. Come and see year 7 tomorrow afternoon. And it feels very relaxed, rather than somebody standing at the front of the hall sort of pointing at things at the projector. So I do think that there's a real benefit to being very personalized with it. And it means that you can hold those folks who need more confidence and need to take a slightly slower approach with dignity, rather than them sitting in that big room thinking, this is not for me, I'm never going to do it.
No, I completely agree. As somebody who's delivered more than his fair share of inset day sessions over the years, it always boggles my mind that head teachers, I have these conversations with head teachers and say, look, you recognise that, you wouldn't do this to children in your classroom.
Nope.
There's a bell curve of experience from 0 to hero within this room.
Absolutely.
How in an hour can you possibly hope to instill positive change? You might share a few ideas, but you're not going to get the impact that you would really want.
You can certainly inspire collectively, but the action, the follow-up has to be personalized. I think that's really important.
Yeah, on the same page on that front, Laura. Thank you for sharing that. So speaking about change, though, in an organisation,
Mhm.
and this is actually true with whether you're in schools or in business, but influencing change within an organisation is quite difficult. How have you gone about influencing change in your school when it comes to technology?
So I think that there is a couple of approaches that I have found have helped me, because obviously I'm now being quite established at Berkhamsted. I've explored this in various different ways with varying degrees of success. I'm quite happy to confess that. And I think one of the things that people in my position are at risk of sometimes is being perhaps a little bit of a lone wolf, because you sort of feel like you're the one pushing, trying to encourage and hoping to bring people with you. And that isn't necessarily a very healthy or very successful approach necessarily. The power of personality isn't going to sort of really motivate folks through. So one of the things that I have learned over recent years is how important it is to build teams of people who come with you and share ideas and explore collectively, and then
Mm,
have influence more broadly. So one of the things that we've been really pleased with at Berkhamsted is we have both an IT strategy group that's very high level leadership level, working group that really thinks about things at a sort of policy and strategy level. We also have a couple of other groups, like an IT user group, that's very much about hearing and listening to people's experiences and seeking to improve on that. But really importantly, we also have a digital innovation unit, which is actually a think tank. So I chair that. We don't have formal agendas other than a single question that we approach each meeting, like how can we improve this? Or what? So, for example, our most recent one is, what are we going to do next about accessibility? And we problem solve collectively. We go away and try stuff out. We come back and report on it. And that means that in lots of departments, there's all this thinking and conversation going on. And it
mm,
means that those influencing change and motivating change actually is a lot easier when you've got a powerful group of well-respected professionals who bring such positive energy. I really look forward to meetings like that because they're so energizing, they're so positive, and so I've got such amazing colleagues. They are a delight to work with. So it's a real pleasure when you are bringing people with you that way. So I think if I were to advise other colleagues in similar situations, perhaps if they feel a little bit alone with it, is to find your kind of little army of the willing, and build it so that people will want to come and engage with it, because it seems like the cool, interesting, progressive place to be.
brilliant stuff. Thank you, Laura. One of the ways I found over the years to try and bring people on that journey you've talked about there is to, particularly for those who do struggle to have confidence in using the technology, and seem to forget one thing from you share with them from one session to the next.
Yeah.
But one of the things I found to be really useful is those quick wins.
Mm.
And the teachers can often be sat there thinking, what's in it for me? And so when you can articulate some wins, they can then go away and practice and embed and just make just part of their everyday sort of teaching and learning practice,
Hmm.
can be really impactful and helpful. Have you got any quick wins that you found that really work when you're sharing and supporting colleagues across Berkhamsted?
Definitely. So there are a couple of things that have been really useful for us. And I think the first quick win that I quite often share with colleagues is the power of snip and sketch. So we are a one-to-one school. We use Microsoft Surfaces with our students and staff. And the bulk of our learning happens in OneNote and Teams. So the ability to quickly grab snippets of things, whether that's from the web, whether that's from an exam paper, wherever it happens to be, and images, inspiration, that that shortcut of Windows Shift S for us is just so powerful, and so that's always been a quick win, I think, for staff, especially when planning materials and quickly sort of gathering stuff for a great OneNote page. For students, I think one of the things that has been really helpful is actually immersive reader, particularly when thinking about accessibility and reading. It's been so interesting to see how students find the ability to have agency with reading to be really empowering, to show them, hey, you can make this work for you. You can adapt
Mm.
it the way you want it. That's for an 11-year-old. That's like, wow, cool. So I can do this at the speed or the size or the color that I want, or that I need. And so, yeah, immersive reader is definitely a big quick win for students.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing those two really handy tips. I know Windows Shift S is one of my personal favorites as
It's
well.
a
It's
lovely
just so
thing.
useful to have it for everything. You can just snip stuff so quickly. And
Mm.
then if you have got a touchscreen device where you can use a stylus or your finger afterwards just to annotate things quickly and things, so useful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Laura. Um, Technology has the propensity to help us in lots of different ways. One of the ways which it can really help us is through the efficiencies and time savings it can bring. I know there are a variety of tools available through Microsoft 365 that can help with that. Things like Power BI, for example.
Mm.
And I know that alongside this, you're a big fan of automation, and you shared with me before we went live a phrase about getting things out of email.
Yeah.
What does that
So
mean, and what does that look like in your school?
absolutely. So, one of the things that I rail against like regularly is your inbox is where things go to die, but so many information goes to die. Definitely, so many folks live out of their inboxes digitally, and I think that that's unhelpful and old fashioned actually, and there are better ways of working. So, I'm really working to encourage staff to rethink about comms and our approach to those quick conversations and how we can use Microsoft Teams chat, for example, better to manage that, but also how we can automate how we gather information. Endless email conversations about dates and times and information from parents and whatever else aren't necessarily helpful if that information then lands in an inbox and you've got to then process it again. Why not gather it in a way that means it's already organized for you and accessible to the people who need to see it? So I think you can cut out big chunks of clunky workflows by thinking beyond email. And so one of the things that our amazing director of IT, Prad Samtani, does, he is an absolute genius when it comes to Power Automate, and does some amazing things. So, for example, we have a new cover system in school, which is brand sparkly new. And now our cover sort of process is really streamlined and automated such that your cover lessons are automatically populated into your Outlook calendar. The cover work is automatically sent to all the people that it's needing to be sent to. It doesn't need a human to kind of intervene every morning in the same way. So yeah, things like that are really, really powerful. And I also think that when we think about data, it's really useful to reflect on how we can move beyond gathering information again by email or in clunky documents that aren't very easy to read. So hence why things like Power BI are so powerful when we reflect on how having the data is all very well, but can anyone understand it? Is it accessible to everyone? Is the story that those numbers are telling you actually something that people can process and understand? So I do think that visualization and transparency are really, really useful, and Power BI is a great tool for that.
And it's interesting you mentioned the word processing there, and you also use the word data because in order for data to become information, it does have to be processed. So why
Mm-hmm.
not use the tools you have available to you to turn that data actually into information? It's information is data with context,
Mm-hmm.
and the tools you have available to you, whether that's collecting it through a SharePoint interface
Yep.
or a Microsoft form, whatever. There are so many great ways in which you can make it and tailor it and make it work for you. How lucky to have someone like your director of IT
Oh yeah,
to be able to
absolutely.
set that
We've
up
got
for you.
some real amazing expertise on Power BI and data gathering as well, through our deputy head and our IT team. So we've got a really strong team on that front, and we're very lucky to be in that strong position. But I do think that everyone, whether you're a classroom teacher or a school leader, can start from the position of what is the story I want to tell when you're thinking about gathering that data. Where does this need to go? What is the output I'm hoping for? Because at least then you can reflect on what that product might need to be, so that when you're gathering that data or when you're kind of harvesting information from all of the various sources, you don't have to go through unnecessary or inefficient processes, because I do think a lot of time is spent kind of wrangling Excel spreadsheets. They take a lot of corralling, don't they? So yeah, there's something interesting to be done in terms of reflecting on beginning with the end in mind.
But that goes to impact as well, though. I think, Laura. I mean, you spoke at the outset of the conversation today about the sparkly, the shiny new, the
Mm.
woo stuff, and all the rest of it, and that's lovely. But in my experience, the really impactful technology isn't that sexy. We're here talking about how powerful a cover system has been in the school, in the fact that it automates things and makes it easier for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's not really that sexy, is it?
No,
It's
it's
not.
not. It's not glamorous, but it
It's not.
makes it makes the most amazing difference in terms of people's quality of life. I mean, that's overstating it slightly, but cover is one of those things that's a huge drain on a school, and absence is complex, and and it's daily and it's messy, and you can't necessarily plan for all of it. So I think anything that's going to simplify and streamline that has got to be a good thing. But I do also think that it's very easy to get hung up on the device itself. And I think, we can all go to bed and be impressed by the latest shiny thing. But unless you've got all of the stuff in the background that's needed to make that device do the best job it can, right through from connectivity and Wi-Fi to sort of the filtering and the monitoring side of things, all of that has to be in place, and none of that is particularly glamorous. But if you haven't thought through all of those pieces, your shiny, sexy looking device is just going to be a bit like, oh, it's a bit rubbish, so it doesn't work. So yeah, for people to really appreciate things, they have to work, and that takes a really big, complex picture.
It does, but what you're doing, by the sounds of it, is actually looking at, because the cover system, taking that as the example, in and of itself, isn't going to transform everything.
No.
But when you've got lots of little things like that, where you've spent some time, maybe your think tank is, where are the pain points? Where are the pressure points? What can we do to solve this? Meanwhile, having thought carefully about not building your house on sandy land and getting that infrastructure, the safeguarding, the filtering, and all those different things in place, when you add all these little things together, it goes to that aggregated marginal gains thing, doesn't it? So the one thing in and of itself isn't going to transform things. When you add up all those little things that you put into place, then you will see a big impact. Is that the sort of things you're seeing across Berkhamsted?
I think so. That's certainly something that is a hope for me and for folks in that sort of digital innovation space, because we all stand to gain from those marginal improvements in efficiency and practice. My principal has kind of set us a challenge of how could technology save every teacher an hour a week, for example. An hour a week is a lot of teacher time. How can we build in more efficiency, more competence, more understanding, better deployment of the systems that we already have, and tweaking them further to save concrete, measurable time? That's a really good challenge. So yeah, that's next on the list.
Sounds like you've been kept very, very busy, Laura.
Yeah, boredom is not my issue.
Listen, like me, you're a big fan of approaching these things from a sort of evidence-informed basis, and like we've talked about, that it isn't often very glamorous when you come to think about how you can reduce cognitive load, or how you can support spaced practice through using Outlook calendar or whatever it is that you've got. But can you share some strategies you've deployed around those sort of evidence-informed approaches that have been successful in the school for you?
So we have again another really powerful group in school. I don't actually sit on this committee, but the academic steering group, who do an awful lot of work on taking the best practices and research and looking at how we can deploy that across our school community. And that group sort of has some quite good overlap with the digital innovation unit. So we quite often look at how we can find a digital solution to a pedagogical challenge, for example. And so things like, sort of spaced learning, recall. I've got some fantastic colleagues who have done some really great work on using digital quizzing tools, online quizzing tools, Microsoft Forms, amongst others, to create self-marking retrieval practice quizzes that students do at the beginning of lessons, sort of as a follow-up to previous units' work. And this creates automatically this bank of data, which the students can then act on to pick out the sections that need further work, for example. So that sort of thing, where you're starting with a pedagogical sort of theory that has become practice, that you then look at, well, how can we actually deliver that? What are the tools that we can leverage? And then exploring those. So we also really like the right tool for the job. So some departments like a particular tool, others will say, you know what, this works better for us. So sometimes it's about tweaking the approach so that you're not too uniform, but the principle remains the same. If you want to use quizzes, that's fine. If you prefer Quizlet, no problem. I'm not going to ever say to people, well, you must use tool A rather than tool B. If tool A is the right tool for your department, go for it. So we have to have a little bit of flexibility in how we manage the approach, while holding on to the principle that comes from that evidence-informed practice.
That's really interesting, Laura. How do you, and I mean, if, let's say MFL want to use Quizlet as opposed
Mm,
to Microsoft Forms, for example,
mhm.
would you find that to be consistent across the entire department, or would that be, individual to a particular teacher within that department? How does that sort of work in reality with you?
So again, this comes back to saving time for teachers. So one of the things that we try to encourage is for teachers to share that best practice and share good resources that work. And so we really encourage colleagues to make sure that we're not duplicating effort, and share those resources that have maybe been curated or created in school with departments in collaborative schemes of work and programs of study. So I think it's really helpful to make sure that people do have the option to share, but you want to make sure that teachers have a level of autonomy within that scheme of work to deliver things in the way that their class needs. Now, that is going to depend on lots of different factors. So I think there's an element of providing capability and structure for people, making sure that they have the skills and the confidence to make the best choice for their classes, and then trusting teachers with their professionalism and experience to get on and do the job the way that they want to.
Thank you, Laura. Look, I know you and we can natter on about all these things forever, ever and a day. But I'm mindful that our listeners and viewers may not have all day to listen to you and me chatting about these things. So I'm going to start to wrap things up here. But first of all, can I say thank you very much for giving up some time out of your very, very busy schedule. As
It's
you
my
said,
pleasure. Thank you.
boredom is not your issue. Um, so thank you for giving us some time today. Before we say goodbye, was there anything else that you'd like to share around technology, strategy, use, tips for the classroom, anything at all?
So I think a spirit of inquiry is a really good thing. And if we want as professionals to improve our practice, every time there's a moment of friction in your sort of daily routine, whether that's doing battle with your inbox or wrangling an Excel spreadsheet that doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or there's a faff every time a visitor arrives in school, it's look at it sort of with a curious mind about how we can make improvements, perhaps using unglamorous but really impactful tweaks using tech. I think that that's a really positive approach to take.
No, absolutely. And out of adversity comes opportunity, doesn't it? And you can then learn more,
Absolutely.
improve your practice so much more. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Laura. If you want to follow Laura, you can do so. She's on Twitter and a variety of other places. I'm sure you can find her on LinkedIn and others as well. But I've popped her Twitter handle down the bottom, and hopefully I'm going to point in the right direction as it moves along. Then ask Laura Knight on social media. But for now, I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you so much again, Laura, for taking some time to join us. And
Absolute pleasure.
if
Thank you,
you're
Mark.
Thank you very much, Laura. Uh, please do follow me on social media at ICT Evangelist. Please do check out the NetSupport group Twitter handle as well. And if you want any more information about all these things, then please do go to youtube.com/NetSupport, where you'll find all of our recordings, check it out, shows, product demos, all those different things combined. Thanks again, Laura. I really appreciate you giving it the time. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Bye.
Bye.